Hey everyone, welcome back to OCD Recovery. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that is it means a lot to me because this really destroyed a lot of things in my life. And it's very unfortunate right now because a lot of people, primarily, 18 to 30, sometimes 35-year-olds, are being very sucked into this kind of bro-ish culture on why anger is a good thing, which societies throughout, we went back and kind of categorized history. If you looked at like a 2,000-year period since Rome, this is probably waxed and waned, but that never really lasts because the time principles of Stoicism acceptance typically are more sound. Usually, and these periods of time can last because people can be very angry for a very long time. But then eventually it fades and people typically want some semblance of peace and unconditional acceptance and love in different ways. And then we always have different individuals or masses of people that kind of want to bring us out and try to think that anger has good things. And, it's not exactly true that anger doesn't solve anything because anger, repercussions, and vengeance has solved different wars, but the outcomes are so detrimental. I mean, millions and millions of people have had to die because of this to solve this problem. So if we could, it's idealist to say that the world peace, never going to happen. Not possible. No such thing. People can barely control themselves. People can barely get their ass off the fucking couch and go to the gym. You think you're going to be able to change the entire world? So it's a nice thing. It's wishy-washy at best, but it's borderline delusional. It doesn't mean you can't hope for that. So all you can really do is work on yourself. And that is that anger is a one-way ticket to a miserable life in many ways. So before I go any further, please subscribe. Hit that like button down below. Let me know what you think about this. Again, this means a lot to me. If you're struggling with anger, most anger management is actually quite poor. I've read plenty of books and excerpts on what people think modern days coaches or therapists or psychologists, they're talking about anger management, and it's almost 99% reassurance and primarily incorrect. So let's talk about anger. As Albert Ellis said, anger is primarily the number one human emotion that people do not want to give up because it brings a sense of power. But when you look at a backdrop, if you were to write a story on paper and you read it in a research format of what that anger has done to people's lives, there are almost no pros. Now, the argument can be made for the anger one, right? Richard Jeni, one of my favorite late comedians, who passed away years ago, he said, his friends always say, anger never solved anything. He goes, anger solved World War II. There's actually truth in that. But again, millions and millions of people had to die. So that's the way it goes. So there is some sort of a pro with it, but that's an outlier. It's like comparing yourself to LeBron James in basketball or Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi in football. Yes, I say football now and not soccer. You guys got me. People like to compare themselves to the outliers. Not a good way to live your life. To be inspired by that in a positive outlier, good way. I don't know if you want to be inspired by the negative outliers, depending on your personality traits and your actions and what your goals are in life. Could be not good. But if you take a worldwide view of what anger does, it's primarily all cons. Now, the beliefs that fuel anger are as followed. People should not do that, and I must prove them wrong. I can't stand looking weak or feeling weak. I have to prove myself. I'm going to prove this person wrong for what they did against me in any situation. Politics, money, religion, the workplace, social media. I mean, think about this. When was the last time you actually got anything out of arguing on social media? By the way, I did everything we're talking about. I put numerous holes in the wall. I would scream my point. Took constructive criticism very poorly. And there's a major difference between extreme rage, vengefulness, and anger versus moderate to high frustration that you wear. Now, in order to change yourself and your relationship with anger, the first thing to remember is this. The goal is not to get rid of anger feelings. So this goes into a mistake that most therapists and coaches explain, and spiritual leaders alike. Go into a room and have a timeout, punch pillows, scream in your car. That teaches yourself, as Albert Ellis said, one of my favorite quotes, the best way to get better at the violin is practice, practice, practice. The best way to get better at anger is practice, practice, practice. What you actually want to do, which you will not get right more than likely for a while, is to feel that anger as you change your response. As you change your response and as you learn to adopt compassion for yourself and others, whilst accepting that acceptance does not mean agreement. It's not about agreeing. what many people do, or liking what they do. And it's not that you can never put your foot down. And I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you. It's not about agreeing or liking, it's about accepting. And that doesn't mean you don't feel an internal anger or frustration. I don't really feel that angry anymore. Like the things that really used to anger me have now moved to more like a frustration or higher frustration. Something has to go really wrong for me to feel some semblance of maybe anger, but it only lasts for a second because my body knows and my belief systems are aware that I'm not afraid of feeling that anger. And because I'm not afraid of feeling that anger, in tune with that, my belief systems have changed to more rational, unconditional, typically life and other acceptance, but primarily there's a good amount of self-hatred to yourself. But you see these big Instagram people, millions of followers, talking about you should be angry, stand up. This is a dangerous. We're not really learning from our lessons right now from previous World War I and World War II and different periods because people forget. When you have large periods of peace, people forget things. That's a global scale, like, economically speaking and globally speaking, socially and on a wide scale. But even individually, anger doesn't really do what most people think. You go to countries that anger is typically less or violence is less, maybe like a Norway or in Nordic countries. I think Norway is rated one of the happiest places. Now, of course, everyone's not walking around, like the smile horror movies all the time. It's a really creepy one like that. That's not what they're doing, right? But the cultural respect, and I would say most people on earth don't have as much. I'm very blessed that I work with dozens and dozens and dozens of countries year after year after year. So not even like presidents and prime ministers talk on a daily basis. Like if I sat down the president of the United States and I say, do you speak to 8 to 10 different countries every day for 6 days in a row? They would look at me and be like, no. So it's like, this is a very unique business. Most people don't realize the scale of it underneath the blindfold. And because of that, I have a very good perspective on what different countries and values see things. I'm not saying there's no angry people in Norway, but culturally they see it different. Take America, take UK, take other countries like that, where anger is promoted in many ways as a good thing. Proving people wrong is a good thing. It's a winning thing, but not really. No one's ever became angrier and had more peace. That's two negative ions bouncing off each other. It doesn't really work like that. So what you're trying to do is not get away from the anger, not get away from the frustration, but feel that in a healthy dosage way. Not in the beginning, you won't, because you have systems and habits and rigid belief systems, so it takes time. And then waiting and trying your best to not act in the moment. Seneca said, the best remedy for anger is delay. I'll say that again. The best remedy for anger is delay. And I would consider Seneca a lot more wise than these mega bro yellers on social media. Social media is the new modern day newspaper. There's a lot of great things that come from some of these influencers. There's things they say I definitely agree with, even when they say it in like a more rigid tone. But it's the delivery. How you deliver your information is a lot more beneficial and has more positive outcomes typically, not always, but typically, than the yelling and screaming. Take someone like Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks, which I'm sure they got angry in their own way. There's 2 examples in America. These peace protests. Take the Pope. I believe the Pope, someone that's more inundated with Catholicism, can remind me. I think he was shot at, and then he met the guy and shook his hand. The other good one is, and I'm not saying any of this is easy. This is really tough. This is a skill. This takes a long time to build. It took me about half a decade to work on this. Half a decade to get to where I am. Even last year, I wasn't where I am today with this. And I can always backslide because those habits are still there. In a scientific way, those neural pathways, they might not be activated, but they're there. They didn't disappear. They didn't evaporate. So, and I've read the Ellis books on anger, how to control your anger before it controls you. I had to work on different things. I had many relapses in yelling and screaming and having to get this together, and affected a lot of my life, But when you look at these individuals, the other example I was going to use, which is the wildest one, Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, killed about 70 women that they think it's more now. One of the men whose daughters he killed, you can look it up on YouTube. Man forgives Gary Ridgway. And he stands up, and he's an older gentleman, kind of looks like Santa Claus. And he said, my faith, I believe he was Christian. He didn't say faith, but I think the way he said it, he goes, it's very hard to practice this. But he forgave Gary Ridgway, who was a clear-cut psychopath, by far. I've watched the interviews of him and the detectives that interviewed him. And Gary Ridgway broke down the tears. Whether it's real or not, the guy never cried in court or anything. I mean, it's a really creepy scene when you see him. They're like reading off the names of the victims. He had 54 or 56 charges. Read woman's name, guilty. Read woman's name, guilty. Just emotionless. So that guy forgiving him, the Pope being shot, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, many other scenarios throughout history and stuff. They did put their foot down. Like they were putting their foot down in a more balanced way. But this idea of like, cigar in your mouth and you're just like childish, immature behaviors. And with these individuals, if I was to sit, because people, let's say the channel gets really big, I would love to have conversations with them, but it would be a waste of my time. It's why many, remember this too, as a sidetrack, most CEOs don't do interviews. You see a fraction of men and women. There are some of the most humble investors, CEOs in every sector who have never done an interview because they don't see a point. They're too busy working. So when you see these like gung-ho men and women that are like super rigid, if you showed that to 1,000 other, like who's the CEO of John Deere? Who's the CEO of Boeing? Who's the CEO of GE Johnson, a big construction company, or Blue Sky, a restoration company? People don't know who these people are in America. And if you showed them, they would be like, yeah, they make some good points, but it's a little too outlandish for me. And you follow who you want to follow, but it's just really not for me. So if I was to sit down with some of these people and have a conversation, this is what would happen. Those individuals would tell me I'm an idiot, which is fine. I would have done the same thing my whole life. I'd have to sit there and try to explain my point. He would probably tell me, or she would tell me, I'm an idiot, again, over and over again. And then the comments would be like, this guy's such a bitch, dude. What a weak man. Like, it's fine. It doesn't bother me. Like, if 1,000 people make fun of me in a row, it does nothing to me. Feel some frustration, but it is what it is. But I've practiced that. Before, I would be all fucking squared up. Like, you better shut your fucking mouth. And that was me changing that. And I have that internal drive. I have the genetic component to kind of give into anger more than most people. So, but changing my relationship with anger, not trying to get rid of it, wearing that sensation, changing my belief systems has made all the difference. And you can do it too. So if you need help with that, please reach out. Phil@ocdrecovery.com. Let me know what you think. Please come in if you're struggling with this. I can really help you. I've been there. Most people are giving really bad information on anger management because the goal isn't to manage anger per se. It's to accept anger. It's not, people will say that, what's the word I'm looking for? Semantics. It's not. There's differences when it's explained, and I can help you through that. Again, Phil@ocdrecovery.com. Hope to hear from you soon. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.